Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell. Camille put a tray of pies in the oven, wiped her forehead with a corner of her kerchief, and sat down at the table. Leaned back in her chair, she led the kitchen with her gaze, assessing the results of her work. Soup ready, cutlets on fried. Mashed potatoes on mint wrapped in a warm shawl, resting on the edge of the stove. The mimosa salad is ready. Stands in the refrigerator, prescribed vegetables on vinaigrette cooked, and already cooled. It remains only to peel them and chop the salad, and everything is ready. Just by that time, the pies will come up. Don't forget to take the compote out of the cellar and put it in the fridge. And put the kvass in the same place to cool down from the road. It's always nice to drink a mug of cold kvass. Camille got up and went to the veranda to get a jar of kvass. It was cool on the veranda and a light breeze blew through the closed doors. Hearing the curtains, it lightly rubbed anything hung on the door against the flies. Camille leaned over to tighten the corner, the curtains, and when you saw that from the gate to her porch walks neighbor Emily. "Hello, Camille." The woman greeted her. "I see you've been on a roll this morning. You must be expecting company." Camille, on the side, let the neighbor into the house and carefully held the net on the door behind her. "I don't want any more flies in the house." "Hello, Emily." She nodded. "Come to the vase, I'll pour. I have guests tonight." "Yes, that's right. You guessed it. The kids are coming." The neighbor sat down to the table and nodded. "Thanks to a mug of kvass." I looked at the kitchen. "They're not coming alone, are they?" she asked. "Are they bringing friends or bridegrooms?" "No, not alone." Camille shrugged. "They didn't say anything like that, at least. Though they might pick up someone at the last moment. With them it happens so where, what only uncooked." Emily wondered. "You could feed a company of soldiers here. Do you think it's too much?" Camille said doubtfully. "I wanted to chop up some vinaigrette. Evelyn likes it. No problem. If they don't eat it tomorrow, I'll take it with me. I don't have time to cook in the city. It'll come in handy. You know, Emily, I can't cook little by little. I can't get used to it." A few years ago, Camille Milne had a large family. Her mother and father lived in a rustic house. She and her husband Sebastian, and their two children, daughter Evelyn and son Kevin. 3 generations under one roof lived peacefully, friendly, happy, and prosperous. The first house left Evelyn, went to the city, studying at the medical university. The girl from the age of 10 dreamed of becoming a pediatrician and diligently went to the realization of his dream. Camille and Sebastian consulted with their parents and bought their daughter an apartment in the city, so she wouldn't have to go to the hostels, a one-room apartment. But it's enough for the girl for the first time. And then how will she get married? Let her and her husband think how to expand. The older generation decided. 2 years after Evelyn left, Camille's mother died. She suddenly went to bed one day and never got up again. The woman was only 74 years old. She had never complained about her health, so her death came as a surprise to the whole family. Hardest of all, Camille's father experienced her mother's passing. He married her when they were both 17 years old and was used to being close to her all his life. The death of his wife was a serious blow to the old man. After the funeral, he noticeably gave up, began to complain often. Then the heart, then the legs, then the lungs. Grandfather smoked. From the same 17 years and after the death of his wife, he began to cough a lot, above with a squeak and with a thick mouth. He outlived his wife by only 11 months. He passed on. After burying both parents within a year, Camille bolted. Without her father and mother, the house began to feel empty, and her heart grew dreary. She wasn't used to being separated from her parents for long. They almost always lived together, but life did not allow her to be sad for long. First, her son Kevin graduated from high school. Exams, graduation, moving to the city. All these troubles took over the woman. Then Evelyn graduated. Graduation again, state exams. graduation, job hunting. And then Sebastian's husband suddenly fell ill. What he was complaining about, I couldn't understand. Somehow it was bad, but I can't explain, as he said. Here and there the office would pull, and then everything seemed fine. Camille made her husband undergo a full examination at the hospital in the district center. However, it did not bring clarity. Not that the doctors in the rural clinic were not too qualified, not that the equipment did not allow to conduct the necessary research. It's unclear. Sebastian, meanwhile, it's a big blow, and looking noticeably worse than before. The Milne couple went into town. Evelyn took in her father's appearance. She got all her fellow students and university professors on the horn. She pushed for appointments at the most modern clinics, examinations, and the best equipment. Eventually, the cause of Sebastian's poor condition was identified, but it brought no joy to anyone. Oncology, a malignant tumor in the intestine, which metastasized to many parts of the body, including the bones. Sebastian was prescribed treatment, but warned at once that it is more supportive to remove cancer from the body at this stage is impossible. But to prolong the life of the patient for a couple of 3 years can still be tried, and they tried on injections of chemotherapy and regular radiation. Sebastian Milne lived for another 3 years after his diagnosis. In the last months, he did not travel anywhere, did not leave the house further than his own yard, and often did not get out of bed at all. But before that, he remained quite active. He worked, socialized with his relatives and children, put his affairs in order. And Camille hoped to the last that everything would be all right and her husband would recover. That's why she couldn't get used to his death for a long time. After burying her husband, the woman was left alone and struggled to get used to the empty house. The children stayed in town. The son came for vacations, and the two of them and their sister tried to visit their mother every weekend, or at least every other weekend. Camille always prepared diligently and happily for their visit. Sometimes the children brought friends with them, and then the house would come alive again, becoming noisy and cheerful. The woman loved such visits most of all, and always secretly hoped for them. And she always cooked in abundance just in anticipation of possible friends and friends of Evelyn and Kevin. The company of young people always lifted her spirits, helped her to keep herself in tone, and not to slip into the abyss of depression. This time, the children came alone. And judging by the look on their faces as they unloaded from the car, they'd had a little argument on the way, or at least a serious argument. Evelyn ran up to her mother, gave her a hasty peck on the cheek, and immediately spoke. "Mom, but do you have any idea what he's come up with? It's impossible." "Yes, wait." "Literature with good-natured mockery," said Kevin. "Let us at least say hello first." He was 5 years younger than John, but in some unfathomable way he managed to behave with her as if she were a little sister. Kevin leisurely approached his mother, hugged her, and kissed her on the cheek. "Mommy, hello," he said affectionately. "It's all right. I'll tell you everything. There's no crime. Don't worry, Evelyn." He turned to his sister. "You can help me unload the bags from the car. I can't carry all this stuff by myself." "What bags?" Camille was surprised. "We brought you some goodies," smiled the son. "My, you're feeding us." "Because I overslept today. I didn't even have time for breakfast." "Of course, my son. Of course he's worried." "Camille, I've got everything ready." She rushed into the house and started setting the table. The children brought into the kitchen a dozen store bags filled with household cleaning products and various household trifles. There were stores in the village, but they were not very good. To buy a decent washing powder or any spices other than pepper and mustard, you had to go to the district center. And this was not always convenient for Camille, who was left without a car after her husband's death. Therefore, the children made it a habit to bring everything they needed from the city. The woman periodically tried to return the money spent on the gifts, but the brother and sister invariably refused, even though they sometimes had to quarrel with their mother over it. So this time, Evelyn waved her hand dismissively. Mom was no more offended. She almost forced Camille to put the purse away. They sorted out the bags, finished lunch. We had pies and compote. And then Kevin said, "Mom, well, I've decided to leave school for a while. I'm taking a leave of absence to work for a while." "What's wrong?" Camille shook her hands. "Didn't you pass? I thought you said you were done." "Sessions are fine," nodded the son. "I just feel like I've lost interest in this specialty. I need to think about it, sort myself out, get my thoughts in order. Don't worry about it. I already got a job. I start Wednesday. The company sells computers and parts. They need a storekeeper for them. Federal company just came to our area. It's all white, all official. The salary isn't bad, but it's a 5-day week. You can't combine it with your studies." "That's good, of course," Camille said thoughtfully. "But Kevin, you've only got 1 more year to go. It's a shame to drop out in the 5th year." "That's what I'm saying," said Evelyn. "You should have gotten your degree by now. And then do whatever you want. Wouldn't you lose a year?" "It would take a year to get a degree in a field I'll never work in." Kevin raised an eyebrow ironically. "No way, sis, that's not for me." Evelyn pouted. She herself had never gone to work in a hospital or clinic after graduating from medical school. Camille was surprised by her daughter's choice. She remembered that Evelyn had been planning to become a pediatrician since the 5th grade, and all the time she had been in school, she had paid extra attention to the subjects she would need for admission. But Evelyn was able to explain her position to her mother. "You see," she said, "I love kids and I'd love to work with them, but every kid has a parent. And that's a living hell. There's almost no one with any sense. They all think they're smarter than the doctor all the time. They argue and make up their own diagnosis. They don't agree with the treatment. They complain. What did you give them? Not the drug they wanted. Or you gave them a massage, and it's inconvenient for them to go to it. Today, all parents treat their children or advice from the internet, or on the precepts of their grandmothers with the help of folk medicine. And it is still unclear what is worse, Baba baby to feed from 2 months or mother's milk to wash his eyes. Yes, wash to cataracts. And then the pediatrician is to blame. Did not warn Mom. I have no nerves are not enough to work with such parents." Evelyn had time to evaluate the parents of her future patients during her university internship. And then, having received her diploma, she went to the courses of a massage therapist. Having learned the basic techniques of massage, she began to practice on acquaintances, friends, former classmates, and even her own brother. Gradually, she improved her qualifications, mastering, in addition to the general, strengthening, and relaxing massages, also cosmetic, anti-cellulite or drainage, promoting weight loss sports, and even therapeutic. With the acquisition of new skills grew on the client base of the girl. Sociable, cheerful, shallow with strong hands, with a medical background. Evelyn quickly gained clients, and soon she didn't even need to advertise her services. She was passed from hand to hand, recommended as an excellent specialist. It was not uncommon for families to have her services. Evelyn was making a great living. She renovated the apartment her parents bought. She had done excellent repairs and bought new furniture. She regularly helped her mother and brother with money. And in the last year, she had been thinking about buying a car. It was difficult to get around to clients who lived in different parts of the city. Taking public transportation was becoming increasingly inconvenient. In general, Evelyn thought that life was successful, and she had chosen the right profession. What's not working in her specialty? So now Mom is a girl, poked in the direction of her brother, and turned to her mother. "Mom, I'm telling you for sure. If he goes to academy now, he won't come back to university. So at least he'd have a diploma, even if not to work on it, but still a higher education." Nick from, "What makes you think I won't come back?" My brother was surprised. "I just want to think about whether I need this higher education and whether I need to go back there. We have a couple of majors related to mine, and I can transfer there or I can go back and finish my studies here. I don't know yet. I'm telling you I need a break." Camille sighed. She understood why her son had made this decision, and she also understood that there was nothing she could do to help her boy. He has to deal with this stage of life on his own. Evelyn is not big, the woman said tiredly. If Kevin has decided so, then so be it. He's a grown-up guy. He's already capable of taking responsibility for his own decisions. Let him do as he knows how. Thank you, Mom, Kevin said with feeling. I was sure you'd support me. In the evening, after putting the children to bed, Camille sat on the porch for a long time looking up at the night sky. She was unhappy with her son's decision to leave the university, but she realized there was nothing she could do about it. It was useless to persuade him, and there was no point in forbidding him. Kevin was long past the age of prohibition, and so was Evelyn. Camille was sure that her son would not return to his studies, but the only thing she could do now was to support his decision. She hoped that with a year's sabbatical, she would be able to convince him to get his diploma. She could think of no other solution. Camille understood what was happening to her son until now. Even though it had been 2 years, he had not been able to cope with his father's death. In the Milne family, Sebastian was the real head of the family. His authority was unquestionable. He was by no means a domestic tyrant. The man treated everyone in the household with respect. He took care of everyone, equally tried to make sure that his loved ones did not need anything. In any situation, he listened to the opinion of each of his relatives. But the last word always remained with him. That's just the way it was. Camille was not a downtrodden housewife at all. She worked because she wanted to work. She ran the household as she saw fit. She didn't have to account to her husband for expenses, free time, and child-rearing methods. It was just that she, like everyone else in the house, had gotten used to having Sebastian, the hope and support, the very linchpin around which the whole family paid. He knew how to do any job without dividing it into men's and women's work. He was able to solve any problems from material to mental. Next to him, it was always reliable and calm. Children in the family, Milne were brought up in respect for their father, and always, no matter what happened, were confident in him, his support, his help. Naturally, when Sebastian was gone, the sibling world had developed a serious crack. But it was easier with Evelyn. She and her mother had been to the funeral and cried heartily for 9 days. They started to figure out how to move on. If you felt sad, you could always sit next to her or in front of Sebastian's picture and cry like a woman, and the pain would go away for a while. But this therapy didn't work with Kevin. For the first time after his father's death, the guy was some kind of frozen inhibition without emotion. He didn't shed a tear at the funeral, just hugged and comforted his mother and sister. And then, even after a little while, he'd get over everything, shifted his grief inside himself, but could not get rid of it. Kevin strengthened himself in front of his mother and sister. He tried to behave as usual. But sometimes Camille, the bastard, poured it into the moments when the guy thought no one saw him and noticed on his face confusion, helplessness, and pain. She didn't know how to help. She tried only to be more affectionate to her son, to support him in everything. Now she realized that Kevin simply had no energy left for studying. He was too exhausted by inner worries. If it were possible to simply take the grief from her son and live it instead of Kevin, she could cope, could do it. But alas, with such troubles each person must cope independently. It cannot be passed on to others. Camille thought that she had bought her son a separate apartment for nothing. Kevin lived with Evelyn for the first years of school. Yes, the apartment was one room, but brother and sister always got along well with each other and got along well together. After her husband's death, Camille decided that she could afford to buy another apartment for Kevin. First of all, she thought, it was time for the kids to get on with their lives. Evelyn's in her early 30s, and Kevin's a big boy. Living together in one room of the novel will not be neither Kevin girl to bring, nor John fiancé to invite, and even just with friends to get together will not work. Sooner or later you will have to solve this issue anyway, so why not now? And in the second place, Milne hoped that the search for an apartment and the subsequent putting it in order somehow distracted Kevin to disgorge him will be the thing that will pull the son out of the longing for his father. To some extent, her calculation had paid off. Kevin actively participated in the search for a new home. With interest went to viewings. Carefully and intelligently assessed the advantages and disadvantages of each of the options. After the deal, he moved from his sister into his own Khrushchevka and began to make repairs in it. Evelyn almost immediately had an affair with one of her former classmates, and it seems would soon move out with him. And then, God willing, she would get married. For her daughter Camille was only happy. But here is a son while he lived with his sister and still somehow distracted from his grief troubles. Cozy Evelyn constantly breaking him then, demanding help in the household, then pulling him out for some walks to the movies to sit down. They even have a tradition that Kevin meets her from late orders and brings her home by transportation or cab or car. It didn't matter. It all kept the guy motivated to keep up. After the move, Kevin had no such drive. He, of course, diligently engaged in repair and has already put in order the kitchen, bathroom, and corridor of the apartment. What did he buy the walls in the room for? But household chores were clearly not enough to keep him afloat. Needed a person next to a person who understood his condition, able to share his grief. Support the guy. Evelyn had handled it for a while, but from a distance, letting a couple of blocks away to provide support, it had become more difficult. She'd seen her brother's condition, of course, and tried to keep a hand on his pulse. Called him every day, visited him regularly, discreetly monitored his acquaintances, fearing that the guy in a desire to get rid of depression will sit on alcohol or some substances. But it wasn't enough. So Kevin couldn't take it anymore. He ran out of energy, even for the institute, and his friends were mostly college friends. I thought Camille would drop out. Who will he socialize with? He needs someone to be around, to give him a background. At least he could make friends with someone at work. The woman sighed. In principle, her boyfriend is cheerful, sociable, friendly. God willing, there will be new buddies, will help him through this black streak in life. And it would be better, of course, a girl found. Love it helps to survive any adversity, thought the woman. And the age is already suitable. You can think about marriage. And if Kevin gets married, there will be no time to be sad. About marriage, Kevin Milne did not even think. Moreover, he considered this event for himself impossible. In the first place, because the romance with girls required mental strength, and the guy recently simply did not have them. He easily got acquainted with girls, easily attracted them, being intelligent, friendly, and not without a sense of humor. He was even fond of some of them himself. But after a week of other communication, Kevin usually realized that he was unbearably tired of the new girlfriend. At first, he just disappeared from the sight of girls. But over time, he decided that wasn't quite fair, and learned to reduce the relationship to nothing, to transfer them to a friendly or buddy rails. By the time he was 22 years old, the guy became a master of easy, non-committal flirting, and it did not upset Kevin too much, because he and only he alone in the world knew about the second reason why neither marriage nor a long, serious romance was impossible for him. A wife, like a steady girlfriend, needed to be slept with. And that was something the guy had a big problem with. Kevin found this out when he was in his second year of study. Previously, girls were not of much interest to him. At school, he was just friends with his classmates. At university, due to his specialty, he was surrounded mostly by guys. There were only 3 girls on their course, and all of them were already taken by the end of the first year. Kevin could probably hit it off. One of them would start right away. But for the first year and a half, the guy was busy just settling in at uni. Yes, and in general to adjust to city life. And then you couldn't count on classmates. It was Kevin who first fell seriously in love. By the middle of the second year with Jenna, he met at a student party and was conquered by her at first sight. The girl was not a stunning beauty, but there was something in her features, in her lively pilot, in her slim and agile figure, something that intentionally drew Kevin's gaze to her. Light, cheerful, spontaneous, mischievous. She reminded him of a curious chick who had recently learned to fly and was now checking every second to see what else his wings could do. Kevin did not leave the girl all the evening, and at the end of the party went to walk her home. In the end, the guys walked until the morning and parted reluctantly, feeling that not everything has not yet told each other. They started dating. They spent all their free time together. Kevin brought the girl to his sister's house several times. He himself was at her house, met her parents, and even became friends with her younger brother. Walks, dates, and a kiss. A few months went by. One day, Jenna invited Kevin over for a sleepover. Her family was going to visit relatives for the weekend, and the apartment was vacant. Kevin bought flowers and a bottle of wine and flew to the girl as if on wings, not suspecting that this evening their romance would end ignominiously. The dinner went beautifully. But when the young people were in bed, it turned out that Kevin was completely unfit for sex. His body refused to respond to Ken's touch and caresses. Jenna already had some experience in sexual relations, so she tried to excite the guy as much as she could. But after half an hour of effort, the girl just cried and screamed, "You lie to me all the time," she howled. "You don't like me. You don't really want me at all. You think I'm ugly." Kevin was shocked at his own body's betrayal. He liked the girl. He was in love with her, fascinated by her. He wanted to want her. And he categorically did not understand what was happening. Attempts to calm the girl down had gotten him nowhere. Jenna simply kicked the suitors out the door, barely letting him get dressed. The next days, she did not answer the phone, did not show up at school. And when Kevin still managed to track her down near her house, she made a scandal with demands not to approach her. The guy didn't have time to explain. And to be honest, he didn't know how to explain what had happened. One thing he knew for sure was that he was done with Jenna. With a technical mind, Kevin began to explore his own body. He used all the pornographic movies, striptease, bars, OBL, madness with girls, unencumbered by moral principles, whom he met in bars. Remembering that he and Jenna had been drinking wine that unfortunate evening, the guy conducted some of the experiments sober, and before some of them he drank a couple of bottles of beer or other alcohol of different strength. The result was always the same. Excitement would occur for 1.5 to 2 minutes and then disappear. Kevin was embarrassed and confused. He didn't want to take on the role of an impotent 20-year-old. After thinking, ordering the embarrassment deeper and gathering all the willpower in a fist, the guy made an appointment with a urologist. At the student polyclinic, the doctor listened to the complaints, examined the patient. He questioned him for a while, then began to explain the data. What is the reason for the inappropriate behavior of the body? Kevin listened diligently to the doctor, but whether from fright or embarrassment, he understood little. The only thing he could grasp was that he needed a small operation. "It's treatable," the doctor said. "It's not a sentence. One small operation. You can even do it under local anesthesia, and everything will be back to normal. There's a short recovery period of about a month. But there's one thing that's not covered by the HMO. It will have to be paid for out of your own pocket." The figure named by the doctor could not please any student, even those who receive an increased scholarship like Kevin. But it turned out that without the operation, intimacy could be forgotten, and therefore life in general. At least that's how it seemed to the 20-year-old. Kevin thanked the doctor, collected the papers and appointments, and left the office. He needed to consult with someone, to tell someone about what had happened. But who? Talking to his mother or sister about such things was out of the question. It was necessary to have an adult, experienced man with whom one could talk in confidence in this environment. Only his father could be such a man. But the boy was ashamed. His father had been fighting cancer for years. Predatory diseases are slowly eating his body from the inside out. It takes a lot of effort and a lot of money. And then Kevin is a young, healthy guy, comes to him to complain about the fact that he trivially does not stand. No, you can't even think about that. He'd have to come in with a runny nose, wouldn't he? And if his father gets the seriousness of the problem and gives him money for the operation, where would he get it? take it away from his treatment. That's the only way. Kevin didn't like that option. On the other hand, maybe he could do without the money. Maybe Dad would just tell him what to do, how to behave, where to find a cheaper clinic, how to get back in touch with Jenna. Just sympathize. Heck, that would be a huge help to Kevina already. While the guy was thinking about what to do, Sebastian Milne died. The problems of sex went to the background and reminded of themselves only a year and a half after the funeral. Kevin, tired of fighting the darkness inside alone, agreed to a friend's invitation and went to some party. After getting pretty drunk, he found himself on the balcony of someone else's apartment, hugging the strange girl, going on a bender. He thought, have a drink, go wild, spend the night with this girl. Why not? He listened to his body and remembered why not. His body was behaving as usual, not wanting to get aroused. Kevin, how'd you get rid of the girl? Did you go home? He was already living alone, so he didn't have to explain to his sister about coming home late drunk. Kevin spent the next month researching the city's logical and anthropological clinics. He made appointments and underwent examinations. Finally, he found a place where he could get the surgery he needed for relatively reasonable money. All that remained was to get the right amount of money, and the guy decided to earn it on his own. He took a leave of absence from his studies, found a place with a suitable salary, calculating that if you save half, then in a year and a half he will be able to save up for the procedure. And he began to save on everything he could, so that he could repair his body in less than a year. Not his mother, not his sister. Of course, he never told me the true reasons for leaving the university. The staff of the office where Kevin got a job was small: a director, a system administrator, 2 salesmen, and a storekeeper. Kevin himself. His superiors more than once offered him to take another loader in the warehouse for the assembly of especially large orders. But the guy refused, preferring to work part-time as a loader himself. He needed the money, and there were not too many orders so far, and it was quieter to pick up the goods yourself and release them yourself. You know for sure that there will be no confusion. Kevin quickly established good relations with his colleagues. He became especially good friends with one of the salesmen, Robert. The guys were the same age and bonded over their love of gothic culture, dark metal music, horror movies, and thriller games with relevant themes. For some reason, after his father's death, Kevin felt an interest in this culture. Not to the extent, of course, to dress up in black hoodies and call himself then in the external entourage. He did not see the appeal, but the theme of death attracted the guy. Robert, on the other hand, despite his gothic leanings, was a cheerful and friendly young man. Like Kevin, he was a newcomer, but he had not yet found a place of his own. He rented a room near the office and was always jealous of his buddy and his separate apartment. "You're a lucky man, Kevin," he said. "Your own place. It's a fire. You can bring girls over every day. But my landlady is like a Cerberus. Even if you invite someone to visit, she walks around, eavesdropping, afraid not to make any noise. No romantic atmosphere, you know. You don't appreciate it. What you have, you don't appreciate. Where do you get those girls?" Kevin joked. "From the customers. We only have mostly men coming home. I drive a car, you can't get acquainted on the bus. I'm at my mom's on weekends too. We're online dating," Robert proclaimed. "It's the most modern and stress-free way, I'll tell you. There are several city entertainment portals. They're often timed. It's like you and me in an ICQ on work correspondence. Only there is a conversation for several people at once. Whoever wants to come in and talk. That's where you get to know each other. If you like a girl, you set a meeting. And then it's a matter of technique. There's just one thing, but the girl can be scary." Robert made huge eyes, made a scary face. "Are there any pictures?" "No," Kevin wondered. "Well, not by default. You could, of course, ask for a picture before you meet. You know, like, how will I recognize you?" "Well, it's not like she's gonna send a picture of herself." "Well, whose is it? Maybe a picture of a cute friend. She could Photoshop her own." Or maybe just send a good photo of her from a good angle. You know, there are some people who look hot in photos. But in real life, they're mama. Kevin laughed, then said, thinking, but if the girl herself is interesting, and it is pleasant to communicate with her, then let her look as she wants. Well, yes, you can just socialize, Robert agreed. But you don't have to meet for that. We correspond at least every day, and that's all there is to it. By the way, there are many of them there too, who do not want to get acquainted, but just want to chat. Let me write you the address of the site. You'll see for yourself. That same evening, Kevin went to the chat room and a week later realized that he was suddenly drawn into such communication. It turned out that he didn't even realize how much he missed the opportunity to just talk to people about everything that was on his heart. With his mother and sister, despite the trustworthiness of the relationship, he still had to choose the topics and words. With his colleagues, we communicated in a friendly framework, which did not imply special frankness. And in the undercover chat room, meaning nothing. Nick, you could talk about anything. Joking, candor, outpourings and attacks, the hitchhiker effect in the modern version. Kevin made several accounts and changed them depending on his mood. One Nick was used for normal communication. He used the second one when he felt the urge to be particularly frank. On thirds, when he wanted to talk about death and Gothic. He was careful not to mix up his accounts, and he was heartily spared by the way the tone of his interlocutors changed depending on what role he was playing today. These little hoaxes kept the guy entertained. Kevin appeared in constant interlocutors, communication with whom gradually and unobtrusively moved to the real. And a little later, the main joint of the chat room decided to organize a meeting of all users. So Kevin got a whole company of buddies at once. It turned out that the site recorded mostly young men and girls about his age, students, yesterday's school children, university graduates. They quickly found a bunch of common topics and interests. They organized activities together, from going to the movies to trips to the mountains. They helped each other with their studies and work. In general, they socialized quite closely. Kevin was grateful to Robert for pointing him to this site. The new campaign to lighten Kevin's depression had quieted down a bit. It was like a lurking thing. It seemed to him that he had quite coped with his condition and his longing for his father, and things would only get better from here on out. One thing bothered the guy. The sum for the operation did not want to accumulate. There were always some unforeseen expenses that forced him to get into his savings and take out a part of it. The car needed urgent repairs. The refrigerator broke down, and he had to buy a new one. Then his mother got sick and needed to buy her medicine. Kevin diligently continued to replenish his piggy bank, but the rate of savings did not please him. However, he reasoned, there was nowhere to hurry. Doctors said that you can operate up to 40 years old, and the girl, for whose sake it is worth going under the knife, he still has not met. So the guy just continued to work in his chosen direction. From the university, he was listed at his own request, and I said triumphantly, said Evelyn, having learned about it. Well, if you so choose, sighed her mother upon receiving the news. After all, you can recover if you think you can. Kevin suspected that he would not change his mind. After working at the company for a little over a year, he was surprised to see that a college education was not necessary at all to make good money. And it was not even necessary to hold managerial positions. More important was knowledge, the ability to quickly navigate a situation, to work with people and be responsible for everything you do. Diplomas were secondary. Having realized this, Kevin finally stopped worrying about the fact that he left the university. It seemed to him that there was nothing to worry about anymore. Everything was going according to plan, as he had planned, and everything would be all right in the end. At that time, Kevin did not know to what extent he was wrong. The chat room user meetings became a regular occurrence. They met once a week on Saturdays in a small bar with billiards and music. The composition of the participants was different each time. Someone could not free a day off to go to the bar. Some, on the contrary, were at the meetings every week. New participants came, old ones dropped out. It was not uncommon for private members to bring some of their boyfriends' friends, girlfriends, wives and husbands, young relatives. Kevin took a cup with him to the meetings several times. His sister's personal life still wasn't working out, and the guy thought that some of the guys in the chat room might be quite suitable for her as beau. Evelyn was not impressed by the guys, but found at the meeting several clients for massages, as well as a couple of girlfriends, with whom she then actively sat in clubs and parties. So Kevin decided that the trip had not been in vain. One day someone brought Wendy to the bar. She said she'd come with a friend. She had recently registered on the site and was shy to go to a general meeting with a crowd of strangers, alone. The friend ended up spending about half an hour at the bar and left. While Wendy stayed, she introduced herself to everyone as Wendy, but calling her anything other than Wendy was impossible. A short pooch with funny round glasses, perky curls sticking out of her hair in different directions. She gave the impression not of a grown-up girl, but of a mischievous little girl. Kevin wanted to take care of her, put her on his lap, feed her semolina, wrap her in a blanket, and tell her stories until she fell asleep. The touching and funny girl turned out to be, however, not a bad conversationalist. She was in her third year of pedagogical school. She was going to teach algebra and geometry. She was terribly worried that her students wouldn't take her seriously. She was into fantasy and folk rock. She wrote humorous fanzines based on her favorite works, sometimes went to festivals with the role-playing crowd. She herself wore Candlestick was not, but made various costumes, jewelry and paraphernalia for the games. In short, acted as costumers. Over conversations about all this, Kevin did not notice how the evening flew by. "You have a very interesting company," said Wendy, saying goodbye. "I'd love to hang out again. Do you get together here every week?" "Yes, every Saturday," Kevin nodded. "But we can chat on the internet on weekdays too. Let me text you the chat room address." "That you waved your hand, Wendy. What internet? I don't even have a computer. I was going to buy one for school and for work. But it turned out to be so complicated. So many different features, you have to understand them. And I don't understand a thing." "Let me help you," Kevin suggested. "I work in this field. Will you tell me how you're going to use the computer? What do you need it for? And I'll find a configuration for you." They exchanged phone numbers and agreed to call each other during the week. And already on Monday, Kevin was surprised to realize that he was waiting for a call from a new acquaintance. Wendy didn't call until Wednesday. But then they called each other several times a day for the rest of the week. On Friday, the girl came to Kevin's warehouse to pick up the computer he had picked up for her. "How are you going to hang all this up?" asked without writing a bill of lading for the removal. "I'll call a cab," shrugged the girl. "Will you help me carry the boxes to the gatehouse?" "You're in a hurry. If you come for a couple of hours, I'll drive you myself." Unexpectedly for himself, the guy offered. "Work. I'll finish and deliver everything in the best way. We'll hook it up right away. Come on." Wendy was happy. "And now, not to wait in vain, I'll run for sandwiches." "Okay, I saw a cute little cafe on the way over. They sell takeout. I just want to eat. I want a nightmare." "How do you want what?" Before the end of the working day, Kevin managed to finish all the business and have tea with Wendy, with the sandwiches she brought. Then they loaded the freshly bought computer into the car and went to the girl's house. Wendy lived alone in a small studio apartment. Such a layout was new to Kevin. He looked around with interest at the dwelling of a new acquaintance. "To be honest, I do not really like that there is no wall between the kitchen and the room," the girl admitted. But it was the cheapest option possible. Such apartments are just beginning to be built. Buyers are not used to them yet, so they sell them cheaper than others. My parents and I decided that it would do for the first time. And then we'll see how life turns out. In principle, even convenient, Kevin grinned, connecting the cables to the system unit. "The refrigerator counts. You don't have to go far near the computer. When I lived with my sister, I had a computer in the kitchen. Only there was room. I like it very much. When I moved it into my room, I missed having a refrigerator within walking distance. Wendy laughed. She was fiddling with the stove, and when Kevin finished setting it up, she called him over for dinner. She was a great cook and a great girl. Kevin was even surprised that she cooked such serious dishes as minced meat and peppers, complex side dishes, and puffed salad for herself. He himself was too lazy to cook porridge and made do with half-finished meals, cutlets or sausages with some uncomplicated side dish like pasta or buckwheat. You can't lose the skill. Really? Wendy explained to him when he expressed his surprise. And if you floss for a few months, you'll forget all the recipes. I try not to let that happen. You're a hero, Kevin said with feeling. I'm not capable of that. It's nice and cozy. The food is good. I don't even want to leave. So just stay, Wendy said and put her hand on his arm. The girl's intentions and expectations were clear in her gaze. Kevin stirred. He liked the girl very much. He was attracted to her, but he suddenly imagined what would happen if he stayed the night. He would get into bed with her, respond to her caresses, and after a while he would run away shamefully under the shouts of awe. So you don't want me, you lied. You think I'm a homeland. He shuddered. Wendy's in a private party now, thought he suddenly told some of the girls there. Word will get out. Yeah, they'll think it's inferior to make fun of him. That's just what was missing. Wendy sensed the change in his mood and asked wearily, "Something's wrong." "I thought you liked me," Kevin nodded. "It's just that, Wendy, I like you a lot," the boy said, deciding to be frank. "I'd like to do more than just stay one night. I'd like you to be my girlfriend." Wendy's eyes flashed joyfully with embarrassment. A smile appeared on her face. "Oh, really, Kevin?" "Yes, waitly," he pronounced. "But you see, here's the thing. I can't have a serious relationship right now. I'm having some health problems, and my whole focus is on them right now. I need to finish my treatment, and then I'll be ready to think about having affairs with girls, that is, with you. And it's a little awkward for me to offer myself to a girl who's a sick inferior." He shrugged his shoulders with an embarrassed grin. "Something venereal? Anxious?" asked Wendy. "No, not at all," Kevin laughed. "From that point of view, I'm perfectly healthy. I can submit any certificates. If you want, it's different. I won't detail it. I'm really embarrassed. A young guy with sores. But I promise you, in 2 or 3 months it'll be over. And then, if you're still interested, of course, I will be," Wendy said firmly and nodded as if to confirm her words. "I'll wait. In the meantime, we'll just hang out as good friends." "Of course," Kevin laughed lightly, stood up and hugged the girl. "But I'm going now." "Okay." He drove home and pondered what to do next. He didn't have enough money for the operation yet. He needed about 2 times his salary. He could try to borrow from one of his buddies, even from Robert. He'd mentioned more than once that he was saving most of his paycheck without knowing what for, or take out a loan. He's got the seniority now, or even ask for a loan at work, and that he's in good standing. The director should go along with it. If you get the money in the next couple of days, you can start preparing for the operation next week. All the tests can be done in a couple weeks, plus weeks of hospitalization, maybe even less. Then a month for recovery. Just the 2 months he'd promised Wendy. Kevin feared the girl wouldn't wait any longer. Of course, she assured him otherwise, but who knows about young girls? She was only 20. For her, perhaps 2 months seems like a prohibitively long time. Meanwhile, he didn't want to lose the girl. Kevin spent the whole weekend researching the websites of various banks. The interest rates on consumer loans seemed ridiculous. He would have accepted them, but the banks thought the amount he needed was too small. The minimum loan amount almost everywhere started at $1,000, and none of the banks provided for early repayment. He would have to pay a nightmare amount of money, Kevin thought. But in principle, it was worth the risk. Robert had been unavailable all weekend. He didn't see his buddy until Monday when he came to the office. The guy ran to the warehouse himself. He plopped down on the chair with a bang and made a solemn declaration. "Yes, it's a draw. I'm getting married. His face shone with that stupid smile that one sees only in young men who are in love with each other. That's news, Kevin marveled. Give me the details. I don't think you mentioned anything like this on Friday. I met this girl, Robert exclaimed. She's beautiful, she's smart, she's a fire in the sack. You can't pass that up. I just met her and got married right away. Kevin grinned skeptically. No, we've been dating for a couple months. Robert was a little embarrassed. I was just afraid to say anything so I wouldn't jinx it, you know. We went to meet her parents on Saturday. They live in the suburbs. They have a house. And I asked her to marry me. And she said yes. I'm moving in with them this week. I'll have to buy a car so I can get to work properly. There's transportation, but you know, it's a long commute. I'm in the middle of it. Your stash will be enough for a car and a wedding. Kevin smiled. He was happy for his buddy. Well, as long as it's for the car. Robert was a little confused. But I'll make enough for the wedding. What's that? We haven't discussed the details yet, but I think I can handle it. At least show me the bride, Kevin said good-naturedly. I can't jinx it now. There's nothing to be afraid of. And easily agreed, buddy. We're going to a new coffee shop downtown tomorrow. They just opened it. Interesting to squeeze in. Come with us after work just in time. I see, nodded Kevin. Go to work, fiancé. You're probably breaking up in your email. Robert went to his office and Kevin, though happy for his friend, felt a little disappointed. He couldn't borrow money from him now. He needed the car, the wedding more than he needed the money. He'd have to bow to the principal, and the principal was surprisingly okay with it. Even when Kevin said that he needed the loan for medical treatment, and once he got it, he would go on sick leave for a while. The supervisor didn't object. He promised to prepare the documents and told him to come for the money tomorrow. And added lastly, by the way, we have not been on vacation once in a year and a half. That's just how we'll get you a vacation. During this time, you will solve your health issues. And you won't need the vacation money. I don't know if there's any unforeseen expenses. Yeah, they were a little shocked. Turns out it was all so simple. Encouraged, he called Wendy and invited her to go to the coffee shop with him tomorrow. The girl happily agreed. It was agreed that he would pick her up after the lecture and take her to dinner. The hall of the coffee house was almost full. But Robert somehow managed to find a free table. When Kevin and Wendy entered the room, he was already waiting for them. He jumped up from his chair. The guy waved at them, and the guys started to make their way over to their buddy. Are you with the lady? Robert exclaimed. Why didn't you tell me? I wouldn't have worried that you'd be bored with us. What's your name? Lady? Wendy said sternly. Nice to meet you. The lovely Wendy. And here's my fiancé. Please love and applaud. Large, tall, he blocked with him the chair that stood by the table. Robert now took a step back and pointed haughtily at the girl sitting behind him. Kevin turned around, and the words froze in his throat. Sitting by the table, smiling sweetly, was Jenna. They didn't advertise their acquaintance, but at the end of the evening they got a few minutes to talk privately. Coincidences happen, Jenna said thoughtfully. They do, Kevin nodded. Are you and Robert serious? Jenna raised an eyebrow and looked at the guy with an uncertain expression. Why do I ask? Did the other guy rush into it? If yes, then you and I will have to communicate from time to time. We're good friends. And if I start avoiding you, will it cause bewilderment or something? No problem, nodded Jenna. After all, what did you and I have? A failed affair. It's been a few years. Who could care about that? We won't be best friends, of course, the girl grinned. But we won't need to be. Right? Right, Kevin sighed in relief. Although the words about a failed romance had hurt him a little. He figured that the easier Jenna made it to relate to their past, the better. Who's the girl with you? Jenna suddenly inquired. A coworker too? Or did you just bring her along to complete the package? That's my girlfriend, Kevin said seriously. Denise made a perplexed grimace. But then Robert and Wendy returned to the table, and the conversation had to be curtailed. Kevin drove Wendy home. They talked and kissed for a long time in the car, and parted only at midnight. He was on his way home, happy and elated. The previous evening the boss had given him a loan, and Kevin even had time to call the clinic where he planned to have the surgery and make an appointment. His vacation was to start in a day and stretch for almost a month. Just enough time for the hospitalization, to prepare for it, and to rest. Kevin could hardly believe that just a little bit more, and he would become a full-fledged man. Gone would be all the complexes that had plagued him for the last few years. Gone would be all the awkwardness with girls. A happy life will finally begin. Especially the girl for this happy life he seems to have already found. Kevin parked in his driveway, thinking happy thoughts in his head. As soon as he stepped inside, he was accosted by a first-floor neighbor from the apartment below him. Kevin lived on the third. There he appeared, finally over the property neighbor from the doorstep. "Where the hell have you been, Kevin? Half of the entrance is waiting for you without water." Kevin froze on the landing, and the neighbor has already dragged him into her apartment. "Look how you flooded me," she said indignantly. "The whole ceiling in the bathroom fell down." "What the hell is that? David, did you kill the whole renovation?" Soon the situation became clear. In the morning, there was no hot water in the house. Kevin turned the faucet and washed his face with ice water. And as it turned out, he forgot to screw the hot valve on the savior, and in addition, and threw a rag into the sink, which wiped his shoes before going out. The water was given in the middle of the afternoon. The sink was an old model without overflow rag, plugged the only drain, and the water, filling the bowl, flowed to the neighbors below. Those, of course, were at work and discovered the flood only after 19 o'clock, having returned home. 12 o'clock boiling water flowed down the walls through the ceiling. The neighbor from the first floor washed out the plaster, sprinkled bathtub, damaging the enamel. The neighbor on the second floor was hit harder. He burned out the wiring under the ceiling made of plastic panels. The lights and all the outlets in the bathroom were in disrepair. Worse, water came over the threshold and flooded the hallway, where the Honorable David had recently renovated. New wallpaper was bubbling off the walls. The laminate flooring had driven behind the wave and completely in disrepair. Kevin's own apartment had suffered as well, but this worried the guy least of all. His own place could be put in order gradually, and with neighbors it was necessary to solve something at once. He spent the next day at work as if on pins and needles. Even a call from Wendy didn't improve his mood. In the evening, Kevin met with the neighbors. They calculated their losses and the future costs of putting the apartments in order and provided estimates. Kevin argued with some of them, but agreed with most of them. The troublesome Vanessa from the first floor and the arrogant David from the second floor. Despite their complicated characters, they were men of integrity, and they didn't try to rip off the hapless guy. Kevin took the money to the neighbors, gave each of them money in accordance with their advice, accepted the receipts, which David insisted on, and said that the settlement was made. No complaints, and closed the door behind the visitors, and for a long time looked with empty eyes at the box, in which half an hour ago lay his savings, lay the hard-won sum for the operation, his ticket to a normal life. Now there was a lonely $10 left at the bottom of the box. Everything had to start all over again. Evelyn was finishing massaging a client when she heard the short trill of the phone. A text message. The girl thought. Hardly anything urgent. She finished her work, cleaned herself up, got her paycheck and went home. The client lived in the same yard as Evelyn, so she fearlessly agreed to late visits to her. And now, when the Mashews came out of the entrance, it was about midnight. Evelyn sat down on a bench near her house for a smoke and a break. Remembering the trill of the phone, she pulled the machine out of her pocket and opened a new message, and choked on the cigarette smoke. Evelyn, she read on the screen. If you got this message, it means I'm no longer alive. I can't do this anymore. And the text was Kevin, and it took Evelyn a lot of concentration and rereading it several times to realize what it was about. She dialed her brother's number, but the phone responded with the standard unavailable caller message. She dialed again and again, going up to her apartment, looking for her purse, quickly changing into her sneakers. Knocking on the door of a neighbor she was buddies with who had a car. It seemed to Evelyn that the damsel, time after time bringing the caller, temporarily unavailable, already sympathized with her, but could do nothing. She didn't get through to her neighbor and ran into the yard, hoping to find some random cab or hitchhiker on the street. Evelyn almost ran into her brother's car on the sidewalk. "Is this some kind of joke?" she shouted, almost out of control. The girl tore open the driver's door of the car and saw that Kevin was sitting in the passenger compartment with his head down on the steering wheel. Evelyn grabbed her brother by the shoulders and turned him around and sent him away in horror when she saw the look on his face. Evelyn muttered to Evelyn, "I'm sorry I couldn't." The plan was simple: drive out of town, get to the abandoned warehouses a few kilometers outside of town, accelerate properly, and drive full speed into the concrete wall of one of the structures. The walls there were solid, thick. Kevin remembered that from the times he'd wandered through those warehouses while playing watch. He wrote the message about his sister when he arrived at the site and set the delayed dispatch for 2 o'clock. He reasoned that should be enough time for him to accomplish what he had planned. And even if by some miracle he survived the collision with the wall at 200 hours, the internal bleeding and fractures would put his body in the right state. No medic would be able to get him out. The plan was simple. Only the boy's body didn't agree with its owner's plan. His consciousness was trying hard to end this drudgery called life, but his reflexes were stronger. When Kevin accelerated for the first time, his hands, as if automatically, twisted the wheel to the right a few meters away from the warehouse wall. The guy made several more attempts, but the result was the same every time. He swerved before he reached the saving wall. His body was not going to die, and tried with all its might to preserve his life. Yeah, I wish I'd brought alcohol with me. I'd have had, say, a bottle of vodka. It would have dulled my reactions, and it would have been easier to crash. But he dismissed the idea of going to get alcohol. Hell knows what could happen on the way. Wouldn't he chicken out, finding himself again among people, not staying or lying drunk outside the store, unable to find the strength to get back to the place? He decided to trick his reflexes, and the last run he undertook, blindfolded his eyes with a handkerchief, found everything in the glove compartment of the car. But it seems that his brain during the previous attempts had already managed to memorize the distance at which to turn. He was only a few meters wrong. His hands twisted the steering wheel again. The car slammed the door on the corner of the building and stopped on a bump. Kevin opened the door by feel and tumbled out of the driver's seat onto the ground. The car stood a little away from the warehouse where the asphalt ended and the former lawn began, the bandage pulled back from his face. He rolled around on the ground for a long time, pounding his hands on the grass and howling. Then he got back behind the wheel and, as if on automatic, drove to his sister's house. He couldn't remember the road, so he parked in the driveway. Kevin just sat in the car, staring at one point in front of him. His mind was spinning with thoughts piling up on top of each other. Wimp, you couldn't even die. You can't do anything. You're not a man. You're a wretch, neither to get a girl, nor to save money, nor to lay hands on yourself. You shouldn't have been born in the first place. Shame on you. And he put his head down and woke up only when he heard his grandmother's cries and felt her fingers clawing at his shoulder. Evelyn almost dragged her brother to the apartment, threw him on the couch from behind the metal across the room, and she sobbed, then shouted some curses, then grabbed Corvalol and Valocordine from behind her. In the end, the girl collapsed on the sofa next to her brother, wrapped her arms around him, and burst into tears. Kevipa sat motionless until the sobs subsided. Then he began to speak in a mechanical, emotional, alien voice. He told everything about Jenna, and about her scandals, and about his sense of inferiority, and about his fear of having relationships with girls, and about his experiments, and about his trips to urology, about his examinations, about his attempts to earn money for surgeries that failed endlessly and tormented him completely, and about Wendy and the loan at work and the flood. Evelyn listened, and when the story was over, she said brokenly, "But you're a dummy, a juvenile dummy." No, I know it was embarrassing to say, but we are not strangers, Kevipia. So many years of silence, tormented. But wouldn't I have helped you? But Kevin didn't hear it all anymore. Having finished talking, he passed out right there on his sister's couch. He woke up the next morning, and at first he was surprised that he was lying in the apartment, fully dressed, covered with a blanket. His head was as dizzy as a hangover, and his body was developing some kind of incomprehensible weakness. Bit by bit, he remembered last night, and to the weakness was added a burning shame. He could not imagine how to talk to his sister now, and in general, how to live on. Kevin listened. The apartment was quiet. Evelyn must have raced off on her own. He had to pull himself together and leave quietly. They'd have a talk to explain, but then they'd do it later. If only Evelyn had the sense not to tell her mother, he thought. Kevin tried to get up, but realized that his body was barely obeying him. His head was spinning. He struggled to sit up on the couch, and after spending less than a minute in a relatively upright position, collapsed back onto the cushion. Getting behind the wheel in this condition was out of the question. "I'll call a cab," the boy thought. He reached for the phone. But then the front door slammed loudly and footsteps sounded in the hallway. Evelyn was back. Kevin squeezed his eyes shut. Let her think he was still asleep. Maybe he'd gone out again. But Evelyn walked over to the couch, crouched on the edge, and put her palm on her brother. The palm felt nice. "Chilly doesn't pretend," quietly said the sister. "I can see you're awake." "It's okay, Kevin. We'll get through this." The boy opened his eyes carefully. Evelyn looked at him with careful sympathy. She was slightly alarmed, but not angry. "I was afraid you'd run without me too." She smiled softly. "That was the thought," Kevin agreed. "That was the thought," Kevin agreed. "Where were you running to?" "Early in the morning. I went to the bank," Evelyn explained. She reached into her purse, which was lying on her lap. "Here's one for you." She took out a wad of money and put it on the pillow in front of Kevin. "I consulted here a little while you were asleep," she explained. "It should be enough for everything, tests, surgery, and even a paid room, if you need it. I was saving up for a car, but then I thought, I don't even have a license. Not yet. And the money's lying around. You need it more." Evelyn. "I, Kevin, am totally embarrassed." I don't know. I'm embarrassed, and you're embarrassed in general." Evelyn was indignant. "It's embarrassing for me to know that you're tormented and have cockroaches in your head. It's okay for me to walk around wondering when you're going to get hurt next time. No, brother, take the money and go to the doctors. If you're confused about anything, first of all, know that it's not all there is. I still have my savings. And second of all, keep in mind, I'm not here to help you so much. I'm not so much helping you as I am helping my own peace of mind by buying from you. You get the surgery, you start dating your Elena, you marry her, and then I don't have to worry about you." I breathed a sigh of relief. Kevin suddenly laughed. He propped himself up on an elbow, put his arm around Evelyn, and pulled her down onto the couch behind him. She was still dizzy. "Evelyn, you're the best sister in the world." "Feeling," he pronounced. "Thank you. And I'm sorry, I really was an idiot. I'll give you the money. I promise I'll earn it and give it to you. In the meantime, I'll be your personal driver. Do you want?" The operation was a success, and the recovery period was no trouble either. It proceeded in full accordance with the predictions of doctors. Still, Kevin was a little worried, going to the last checkup. But the doctor, having made the necessary arrangements, said solemnly, "Well, congratulations to you, young man. You can lead a normal, full-fledged sex life, but I only beg you not to throw you into all sorts of trouble. We have good wine at our clinic, of course, but it would be better to stay away from them. Kevin laughed and fervently assured from Kulikov that he was not going to indulge in debauchery. Before the first night with Wendy, Kevin was, of course, quite nervous. The assurances of the doctor is one thing, but what if in practice something goes wrong? However, feeling that his body obeyed him and behaved according to the situation, he quickly relaxed. And when Wendy pressed her whole body against him and whispered in his ear, yes, it was worth the wait of a couple months. For the first time in years, he felt completely happy. The relationship theirs was progressing like the best of dreams. The girl was easygoing and fun. She was interesting to talk to. It was easy to organize ventures and little adventures like sudden trips out of town and night rolls around the city. Rosy friends with her were wonderful to spend time with in bed and nice just to be around. Kevin had even almost abandoned the chat room because Wendy was completely enough for him to override his need for trusting companionship. He introduced the girl to his sister and was happy to see them becoming friends. Wendy and Evelyn spent hours on the phone, discussing some of their feminine secrets. From time to time, they went shopping or to clubs, or had coffee shop get-togethers. Camille, Kevin also introduced his favorite, and she approved of it. They visited their mother at least a couple times a month. One day on one of their visits, Camille sat her son down beside her and sternly asked, "How long are you going to fool the girls? Are you thinking of getting married or not?" "I think you should," Kevin smiled. "We talked about it, but we decided to wait until Wendy finished her studies. When she gets her diploma, we'll get married then." "All right," Camille nodded. "Are you going to get your degree? Or my wife will be educated, and you'll be uneducated." The woman grinned good-naturedly. "Mom, I don't need a diploma yet. I need to work to save up for my wedding, and then my wife will be young. You have to feed her every day." Kevin laughed. "Oh, it's up to you, of course." His mother shook her head, and after a moment's silence, she added a little, "She's a good one, Wendy. I wish I'd lived to see her. Would he have liked her?" "Yes," Kevin said after a pause. "I think my father would have liked her too." And he put his arms around his mother and pulled her to him, kissed her on the top of her head. He thought that for the first time in years, he didn't feel bitter about his father. Kevin's jokes about his work were not in vain. The company he worked for was gradually expanding. Turnover was growing, and the client base was developing. Accordingly, the staff was growing. Kevin himself had recently become a warehouse manager. He was assisted by 2 storekeepers and 2 loaders who worked in shifts. The sales department has grown. The chief hired 3 new managers, who were now supervised by Robert. The guy was terribly proud of his new position and bragged about it to his future wife. He and Dimka continued to live together and planned a wedding for the end of the summer. Kevin and Wendy occasionally visited them, but the guy noticed that Wendy did not like Jenna and tried to minimize such visits. He would bring Robert to his house or meet him on neutral territories, in bars, cafes, at some events like concerts or mundane parties. Kevin didn't really understand why he was acting this way, but he felt better. Right. However, in the middle of the summer, a friend persistently called Kevin to his place. He needed help with the repair of the car, and he timed it to coincide with the weekend. He decided that after the repair work it would be possible to go to the river, to grill kebabs, and in general to enjoy all the delights of summer vacation in the village house. Kevin agreed, but Wendy suddenly opposed the idea. The guy explained as best he could that he had already promised and that it was awkward for him to let his buddies down. But the girl deflated, all through Friday night. By Saturday, they still hadn't made up, and Kevin left for Robert's with a heavy heart. He decided that he would try to finish the repairs as soon as possible, so that by evening he could go back and make up with his beloved. "Yeah, I don't know," Wendy said sadly into the phone. "Maybe I behaved wrongly. I don't think so, no offense taken. But it's Jenna who's so mean. I can't even explain why, but I don't want them to communicate." Evelyn sighed. She knew why Jenna was nasty, but she wasn't going to tell the girl about it. She would have to reveal her secrets herself, but she was tired of hearing Wendy whine too. "Wendy, it's okay," she said soothingly. "I'm sure Kevin will come over and you two will make up." "Wait, he's calling me." "I'll call you right back." Evelyn dropped the call with Wendy and took the call from her brother. But after talking for a couple minutes, she did not call the girl back. She simply forgot about her. Throwing Petrovka on a house dress and grabbing her purse, Evelyn rashly rushed out of the apartment. Her way lay to the intensive care unit of one of the city hospitals. She was in a hurry, persuading the cab driver to go as fast as possible, but she was too late. When the girl rushed into the ward, Kevin had already died. The whole thing was stupid and ridiculous. It was a hot summer day. Guys fiddling in the garage in the process of repairing the car drained the brake fluid from the system in the first bottle. It turned out to be plastic, greenish 2-liter from under the spike. After a while, already finishing the work, Kevin, thirsty and without looking, grabbed the first bottle. He managed to take 2 big gulps of brake fluid before he realized that something was wrong. Robert immediately clamored to call an ambulance and have them pump his stomach. But Kevin took his concern and the whole situation rather lightly. He went into the bushes, stuck 2 fingers in his mouth, and said that the gastric lavage was finished. From the entreaties to go to the doctors, Kevin only waved away. Future father-in-law Robert, having learned about what had happened, after half an hour offered the guy to drink a glass of vodka. They say, from the toxins contained in the brake fluid. Ethyl alcohol is an antidote. This, by the way, confirmed later by the doctors who came for the guy. Except that the vodka should have been drunk immediately, and after it all the same to wash out the stomach. But the guys did not take this into account. They finished the repairs and started to gather for shashliks on the riverbank. Kevin, citing fatigue, lay down to rest on a chaise lounge in the shade and dozed off. Robert decided not to wake him. He instructed his mother to explain to the guest where they would rest when he woke up. The company went to the shore, and when they returned in the evening, they found the guy on the same chaise lounge. Friends began to push Kevin jokingly. "Here, they say what Sonia overslept. All tasty." The guy opened his eyes, tried to get up, and rising to his feet, collapsed to the ground. He lost consciousness. Here, of course, called an ambulance, but it was too late. I from the brake fluid had already spread throughout the body. It had affected all the organs of consciousness. Kevin never came back. And despite the doctor's best efforts, he died the next morning. How could it be, Evelyn? How could it be? Camille stood by the cemetery bed. Until a few years ago, this section of the cemetery had been empty, but now it was almost entirely occupied by her family and her parents and her husband. And now her son. Things had just started to get better, she said brokenly, and there had been a promotion at work, and her salary had gone up. And Wendy, and he'd gotten over his homesickness, and that's what it was all for. To lie here now. Evelyn hugged her mother in silence. She herself was still in shock. Not since the day Robert had called her from the phone and told her what had happened. Not talking to doctors, not funeral troubles, not caring for her mother, could not rouse the girl, and she became as if slowed down, walked slowly, spoke more softly. She looked as if she were looking at something. She couldn't believe her brother was gone. All 3 women close to Kevin had experienced his death in their own way. If Evelyn was in a stupor, Wendy was literally hysterical for days on end. She sobbed nonstop. That subsides a little, then again wanted to sob in the anim. Evelyn asked the girl to go with her to her brother's apartment to pick up clothes for the funeral. But there was little use for Wendy. As soon as they crossed the threshold, the girl would immediately drop to her knees and sob in her voice. Evelyn cost a great effort not to consider her for it. Everyone was unhappy after all. She thought, everyone is bitter and hurting. But there are things to do that no one else will do but us. It takes focus and concentration to see them through. Can't stay out of the way and then. Evelyn was greatly relieved when the company of private citizens who had come to Kevin's funeral took the girl in and drove her back to town the day after the funeral. Camille had fallen into a kind of lingering bewilderment. She hardly cried at all. she behaved as usual. But every minute, every second, she tried to understand what had happened to her son. Why was it so? The woman could not accept the injustice of what had happened. She had to find someone to blame. Every day she had a new theory, and every day she shared it with her daughter. I went to see Kevin at work. I told Camille. The boss was giving the funeral money. And the girl who worked with him told me that his storekeeper wanted Kevin badly enough to take Kevin's place. No other way than he poisoned him. Mom is tired, Evelyn said. God be with you. The storekeeper was not with them that day. Camille calmed down for a while, and then it started again. Maybe that storekeeper, Robert, put Kevin up to poisoning them. Gave him money. For instance, she'd speculate. Well, he'd drop out and Mom would sigh. Evelyn sighed. Robert, Kevin was a longtime friend. He wouldn't do that for money. Besides, it's not the kind of time to be harassed for a promotion. It's not a presidential position either. It'd be something to take the heat for. Camille nodded, but a day later, she was back at it. Didn't the girl who came with Robert to the funeral? I recognize her, she'd say. That's Jenna. Kevin used to bring her here once. I think they were dating. Maybe Robert found out and got jealous, so he slipped her a bottle of poison. Mom, that was years ago. Evelyn struggled to act calm. Everyone had long since forgotten about it. Kevin, Wendy had it. Robert, this Jenna was about to get married. But what jealousy? Wendy, Evelyn. What if it was Kevin himself? Suddenly, Camille said. Wendy said they had a fight before this trip. Suddenly, he was so upset he decided to poison himself. Evelyn's mom raised her voice. Don't talk nonsense. They didn't have a fight, just a little spat. He wouldn't have poisoned himself over it. But Camille wouldn't calm down. She wanted to find out why her son had died. Having questioned everyone who was with him at Robert's, having talked to all colleagues and acquaintances, the woman decided to resort to the help of psychics. Her neighbor Emily told her that in the neighboring village, there is a girl who can communicate with the spirits of the dead. And Camille is going to visit her. Evelyn, tired of arguing, went with her mother. She was skeptical of Camille's ideas, but the idea that Danko might have been poisoned kept her on her toes. She knew, unlike her mother, that the boy had tried to commit suicide once before. Of course, the situation was completely different then, and Kevin's condition was different. But who knows? He was very fond of his Wendy, and maybe their little spat had really hit him hard. Or maybe there was something else in his life that Evelyn had missed. Had she failed to notice and lend a shoulder in time, leading to a tragic outcome? Doubts gnawed at the girl, so she, young materialist, agreed to go with her mother to visit the young media mind. The psychic girl's appearance didn't inspire confidence. An ordinary girl of about 6 years old in a short cathedral skirt, wearing a pink t-shirt with a teddy bear and stompy sandals. Blonde hair tied up in 2 short axe bridges appeared on the sides of her face, cheeks, and plastered with watermelon. It's a crumb of a medium. Don't be ridiculous. However, the girl, seeing the guests, got out from behind the table, took Camille by the hand and led her into the room, nodding to the giver, followed by seating the guests. The girl went out and came back in a couple minutes already clean, and hello, Aunt Evelyn. Hello. Camille said it politely. How do you know our names? Camille was surprised. No, he said, shrugged her shoulders. He said you were coming. What else did he say? The woman wondered. He said it was nobody's fault. It's just the way things are, said the girl. He told you to say he didn't mean it. He didn't. To tell you not to worry. It happens. Things don't work out right. And he also said that Uncle gets upset because you worry makes him uncomfortable and hurts. Camille nodded. Then she cried, and Evelyn, rummaging in her purse, took out a handkerchief and handed it to her mother. The girl medium slipped out of the room and returned with a glass of water. Drink it, Camille, she said sternly. And stop crying. You can't drown them with your tears. The woman obediently drank the water, sighed a little, pulled herself together, and thanking the young seer moved to leave. Evelyn followed her. They were already on their way to the wicket. When the little girl looked out of the door, she shouted, "Aunt Evelyn, did you forget your handkerchief?" Evelyn turned and hurried back to the house. When she reached the porch, the girl dragged her into the hay, wrapped her arms around her, pulled, forcing her to squat, and whispered quickly in her ear, "Her not telling you. Telling her to talk Kevin didn't tell her to. He didn't want it to happen this way. He didn't himself. It was the girl who wanted it, not his girl. Another girl. It used to be his. Don't tell her. Kevin didn't say to. She'll be worried. Kevin doesn't want to hurt this girl. Let her live as she wants." He said. "What else did he say?" asked Evelyn, and stunned by this fast speech. "He said that he loves you, that you are the best sister in the world." Already slower and calmer spoke the girl. "And he said thank you for not telling your mother about how he rode in the car. You don't tell me about the girl, and you don't tell me about the girl. Let her live as she pleases." Evelyn promised to take the handkerchief and went out. Camille had calmed down considerably after her visit to the young soothsayer. She stopped looking for someone to blame, thinking up different versions of what had happened. She cried the evening after the trip. She seems to have found the strength to accept death. Her son was often sad. Talked to Kevin, sitting down next to his picture. Talked to her husband too, but she didn't turn on her daughter or herself. She seemed to believe that this was the way things were and to accept it. Evelyn, on the other hand, had fallen into anxiety when she returned from the village to her apartment. She had been pondering the girl's words to the psychic for days on end. The girl wanted not his girl, another girl. Used to be his, it sounded in her head. Under that description, out of those who had been there that fateful day with Kevin, perfectly fit Jenna. But that's crazy, Evelyn thought. Why would she do that? She really has another life, another fiancé. It's been years. What's the big deal? But the girl who didn't know who was next to Kevina or what their relationship was. For some reason, she said that. That phrase can't be explained by a random hit, like the common one. He said he loved you. Maybe she did somehow manage to communicate with Kevin. All the more reason for her insistence on not saying anything to her mother and for not taking revenge on this mysterious girl. She's quite the spirit. Only my little brother would say that. Thought. Evelyn hesitated for a while longer. She called Robert and asked him to arrange for her to meet Jenna. Robert was clearly unhappy with Evelyn's request. He spoke into the phone. "I understand, but you have to understand, it's not our fault. Seriously, I really appreciated Kevin. He was my only real friend, and Jenna even more so. She hasn't been herself since that day. We've already been questioned by the police. Like he didn't die on his own. Maybe he was poisoned. Thank you, by the way, for not filing a report." Evelyn, stop making Dimka nervous. Evelyn vowed that this was the last time. The guy sighed and appointed her a meeting at their house. Jenna has been self-conscious about her boyish figure all her life. At 14, most of her classmates could already boast a seductive, rounded figure. And by 16, many of them began to buy themselves a bra size 4. Against their background, skinny Jenna with small breasts and narrow hips looked a little poor. Added sadness and the fact that boys at 16 were more interested in round girls and were not able to appreciate the elegance of the figure. Girls used to tease their girlfriend. "Good for you, uncle," said one of them, "can safely walk the streets at discos as you want to dance. Not that any man would bother you, he wouldn't even turn around." Yeah, I've been picking up on that. You don't even have to worry about getting raped. No normal man could get a hard-on for a figure like that. Jenna laughed with them, but at home she cried into her pillow. After entering the university and getting a relative freedom from parental control, the girl began to experiment. By the end of the first year, she managed to get into bed with 3 fellow students, but these victories did not please Dimka. Guys were modest nerds, and to seduce them did not have to spend a lot of effort. They could hardly be considered normal men. That all changed when Kevin showed up. Tall, handsome, intelligent but not nerdy. He was more attractive than all those boring locks. Besides, he had a serious crush on Jenna. He admired her. He sought to spend as much time with her as possible. He admired her face and her figure. In his eyes, Jenna saw herself as a beauty. And in addition to that, she herself fell in love with Kevin for the first time for real. All the more intense was the blow she received when they were in bed for the first time. All the old complexes suddenly came to life and came at her with a new force. She felt as if she had been mocked, made to believe in her own attractiveness, and then pushed her nose into a muddy puddle. And this was the man she trusted, the man she loved. It was almost impossible to get over. But Jenna did. Over time, she had etched out her love for Kevin and had almost forgotten about him. She managed to realize that for every figure there is a connoisseur, and there are many men for whom she looks attractive. She became more confident, learned to flirt, gained admirers, and even a fiancé. But when they met again with Kevin, she realized that she could hardly hold herself together. The memory of her first youthful love and first serious disappointment, it was too strong. Even if they had just met on the street or in company, it would have taken her a long time to recover from that chance encounter. And here the meetings had become a regular occurrence. Kevin, since their separation, had matured and gotten even more handsome. Jenna kept catching herself comparing him to Robert. And these comparisons all the time come out not in favor of her fiancé. But even this could be survived if it were not for the girl next to Kevin. Wendy is a fat, shaggy hen with stupid glasses who can neither step nor speak. Naive, overly enthusiastic, simple-minded, stupid. What does Kevin see in her? Why does he look at her with such admiration? Why is he so caring and affectionate with her? What is it that has kept him so long by her side? These questions kept the days going. Each time, watching the behavior of this couple, she became more and more perplexed. And each time, she became more and more angry and resentful toward Kevin. After a while, they grew to the point where it became impossible to carry them around. Me, he didn't want me, but he wanted that fat one. I yelled in Evelyn's face at me. He couldn't get a hard-on for that stupid cow. He told me, I love you, I love you. He was just having fun. He was just lying. And I'm sorry for him. Yeah, it took me a year to come to my senses. You can't imagine what I went through. And he's like that, like nothing happened. From that Sorpus, Evelyn didn't have to ask the girl anything. It seemed Jenna was already tired of carrying her own worries about what she had done. Evelyn just sat down across from her, asking Robert to remove himself, and took a long look at the girl. Jenna chortled at first, and then started to get embarrassed under that intense stare. And when Evelyn asked softly, "Would you explain why you did it?" the girl seemed to burst into tears. I thought he was having fun with her too. Screaming, she's teasing, enticing. But I see they've been together a long time and sleeping together. They slept over, I was listening. So he wants her, and she wants me. Jenna noticed that the guys had poured brake fluid into a lemonade bottle. And the plan was born. It was hot. There was no water in the garage. The girl rushed to the nearest store and bought 2 bottles of it, solemnly brought them into the garage to everyone's approval. When both came, she put one next to Kevin, carefully saying, "Yes, I put it here for you again so that you would not get distracted, if anything." Having waited for the guy to die and memorized the location of the bottle, she stepped aside. And after a while, when Robert were fully immersed in their business, switched the lemonade for brake fluid and ran out of the garage. "I didn't mean to kill him," she said. Evelyn quietly shouted, "I thought I'd just get a little toilet poisoning for a couple days. We got Aukies across the street, so they're drinking breaks every day, and they're alive. I didn't think they were dying from it. I didn't even want to." The girl cried. "I just wanted to do him a little mean thing, ruin his weekend. If you want to get in no mood to settle down with that Wendy box. I'm shocked it turned out this way myself." She burst into tears, and when she subsided, she looked up at Evelyn with cold eyes. "Just so you know," she said, "I'm the one who told you everything. I'm not telling anyone else. If you're going to report me, you can't prove anything. I'll say that I was joking, that I made a joke, that I was nervous to calm you down, and you didn't come to us anymore, that these bottles have everyone's fingerprints on them. I'm not the only one who took them, and there's no more evidence. You got it. What if I got it all on a tape recorder now? Evelyn asked. So what? The girl shrugged. A heartfelt confession. I'm not going to write it. And these conversations can't be used as evidence. I can retract what I said at any time. And you can't do anything to me. I wasn't going to do anything to you, Evelyn said with a sigh. I mean, I'd love to snap your head off right now. Kevin didn't tell me to. He said let him live as he lives. So live your life now and remember that you killed a man for nothing. Oh, don't get all moralistic on me, the girl said. But Evelyn got up and went to the door. Robert was standing at the door. Are you finished? He asked Sukhov. Yes, thank you for letting us talk, nodded Evelyn. Evelyn, are you in no hurry? Suddenly the guy asked, can you give me a ride into town? Because my car is still in repair, and now it's already at 100. Where are you going? Jenna perked up. I don't know yet, Robert answered. But I can't live with you anymore. You were eavesdropping. The girl said it in the most indignant tone. Shame on you. Who said anything about shame? Robert sighed. It wasn't even necessary to eavesdrop. You're lucky your parents aren't here, or they'd know what you're up to. Step aside, and I'll pack a bag. Evelyn brought Robert back to her place. And with a bat until you find an apartment, she said indifferently. The armchair bed is all yours. Camille took a tray out of the oven and admired the pies lying on it. They were nice and crispy, fluffy and fragrant. Why are you? You've been like that since this morning. The voice of my neighbor Emily sounded from behind me. How are the kids coming? You guessed right, laughed the woman. Look, they've just arrived. She nodded at the window. A car pulled up under the window, and Robert jumped out and opened the door for Evelyn. Evelyn slowly made her way out of the cabin, heavy, carrying her pregnant belly. Camille splayed her hands behind her as she hurried out of the kitchen to meet her family.